Okay.
Good evening, and welcome everyone to the first program for 2021 of the Broome County Historical Society. Glad you're all with us this evening, sitting in your warm home and not outside where it's very cold and windy up here in upstate New York. Our speaker this evening is Roger Luther, Broome County historian, also the author of several books and articles, newspaper columnist, frequent public speaker, executive director of the Preservation Association of the Southern Tier, and also a member of the Broome County Historical Society Board of Trustees.
Wait until it comes up.
Our program is lengthy, so we are asking that
Program
you
will
hold
begin
all your
soon.
comments and questions until the end. And again, please, everyone, mute your audio, turn off your video so it does not interfere with the presentation. So Roger, let's go up to see the castle on the hill.
Sounds good. Well,
Roger, unmute yourself.
well, that works better. Hopefully everybody can hear me now. Okay. Thank you all for coming. This is going to be hopefully an enjoyable program. We've done a few virtual programs so far for the Historical Society. Everyone so far has been a great success, but I got to tell you, we were just blown away with the response to this one. It's nice because I'm talking about my favorite subject, the castle on the hill, and apparently it's a lot of other people's favorite subject as well. We posted the event on Facebook a few days ago, and last I checked this afternoon, let's see, 9,500 people had responded, 1,500 with a plan to attend. It just shows you how popular the castle is and how much it means to this community, which is what this talk is all about. Now, Zoom can accommodate a total of 300 with the license that we have, and that's maxed out. So if anybody tries to log into Zoom right now, they won't be allowed in, but they will be directed to the live stream on Facebook. So we're simultaneously live streaming this to our Facebook page, Broome County Historical Society Facebook page. And as I understand it, there is no limit. So theoretically, the other 9,200 people could be watching this on Facebook as we speak. Hopefully everything goes well. Hopefully technology doesn't let us down here, and we're ready to go. Again, please make sure your audio is muted and your video is off. Let me see if there's any other preliminary comments here. Yeah, as we're going along, if you have questions or comments, feel free to log them in on either Zoom chat or the Facebook comment section. It's not likely, with this size of a crowd, it's not likely that we'll be able to answer them during the talk, but right after the talk, you can be sure that we will go through them all and get back to everybody. And the other thing is that because we've had such a huge turnout tonight, we will be doing this again, probably in another 2 or 3 weeks. Just if you're interested, stay posted and we will make the announcement. Here we go. I see another group of people just got in the waiting room, so I'm letting them in. And here we go. In 1858, construction began on a massive stone structure at the outskirts of Binghamton. With this building, its founder would pioneer medical addiction treatment in this country. Its designer would become one of New York State's leading 19th century architects. And for over a century, it would provide security, healthcare, and employment for thousands. Abandoned nearly 30 years ago, this National Historic Landmark now awaits restoration and rebirth. That kind of sets the stage. So this is a history and a virtual photo tour of the New York State Asylum at Binghamton. Just a couple quick comments here. The history was pieced together from original vintage documentation on file in the Broome County Historical Society collection. It's an amazing collection of wonderful castle artifacts, and through interviews with former employees and families of former patients. Regarding the photos, they were all taken with permission of the owner of the building. They all were taken over a period of several visits over recent years. So in some of the pictures, you'll see things that are no longer in the building. For example, you'll see some furniture or photographs or instruments that were on display. All of that has been removed from the building. And all of it has been removed to a secure, climate-controlled environment. It's being logged into our museum systems. So it's all being preserved and taken care of. None of that is in the building at this point. The building is completely empty. Let me say this right off the bat, that public access to the building is not permitted. And there are some good reasons for that. First of all, it's located on an active health center, right in the middle of an active health center. So patient privacy is, of course, a concern when you have people walking around the grounds. It's also hazardous. The reason it's closed right now is because part of the facade collapsed several years ago. And so it is a bit hazardous to go even around the outside of the building and certainly inside the building. And finally, the third reason is to protect the interior. Right now, building studies are being done to determine how this building might be renovated and reused. And it's important that we don't allow access at this point where things could be disturbed, where even things could be vandalized. So anyway, this is a really rare opportunity to see the inside of this building that basically people haven't been in nearly 30 years. I hope you enjoy the presentation. It's in three parts: history, photo tour, current status of the building. And it all started with this man, Joseph Edward Turner. This is a quote from a book about the man. If there is a single person responsible for the birth of medically directed addiction treatment institutions in the United States, it is Joseph Edward Turner. And if there is one institution that best captures the triumphs and tragedies of 19th century addiction treatment, it is the very first of such institutions, the New York State Inebriate Asylum. That's a quote from a book called The Drunkard's Refuge, if you're interested. It was by Crowley and White. It was written about, I think, about 20 years ago. And there he is. That's Joseph Edward Turner. Back in the mid-1800s, he had a small medical practice in New York City. He wasn't really an educated physician, but he worked with people that were, and he started a medical practice. In 1843, he learned of new approaches to the treatment of alcoholism. Alcoholism was a pretty serious problem in the mid-1800s. And there was a school of thinking that was started that maybe it's a treatable medical condition rather than just a vice. So he bought into that philosophy and pursued it. In 1852, can you see these pop-ups? 1852, he filed an application to the New York State Legislature for incorporating an inebriate asylum. That had never been done in the country. He saw a need for it. He decided that he would go for it. So in 1854, New York State Legislature granted a charter for the asylum. But there was a condition, and that condition was that Turner would have to raise half the money to build the building. The estimate was that it would cost $100,000 to build it. That meant Turner had to raise $50,000. Well, I don't think they were figuring on how driven this man was, because he spent the next 4 years raising money to build his asylum. And the way he did it was by selling $10 certificates. He traveled back and forth across the state several times. He would approach a doctor, a minister, whoever he could get his hands on, and he'd say, okay, you give me $10 for the asylum, and I'll give you this piece of paper. If for any reason the asylum doesn't happen, if it doesn't get built, you can turn this piece of paper in and get your $10 back. That's how he did it. He actually raised $50,000 that way. So he had his half of the money. Now he needed a place to build the asylum. He looked around at a few places. He was really impressed with Binghamton for a few reasons, because it's centrally located, good railroad connections, pleasant surroundings. He came to Binghamton, and this is the diary, his actual diary from 1858. I'll show you a couple excerpts here. April 13th, he visited several sites. The citizens of Binghamton had a meeting on the subject of a site for the asylum. The next day, he rode around with a committee looking at sites. And then the next day, the citizens of Binghamton had another meeting, and Daniel S. Dickinson presided. And then it happened. The next month, the village of Binghamton provided 252 acres of land for the asylum. And this was a big farm known as the Lion Farm. Right on the outskirts of town. And that's where it was going to be built. It looks like somebody is drawing on the screen. So if you would, please refrain from doing that. I don't think there's any way I can get rid of that. So if you can, please do that. And we'll just move right along. Now we needed an architect. In New York City, there was a young man. This is an older picture of him, but there was a young man named Isaac Perry, worked for an architectural firm. And he and Turner knew each other. Turner wrote about it later. He said Isaac Perry was working as a carpenter and a stair builder, had little experience as an architect. And that's true. By that time, Perry was a very accomplished designer of stairs, of beautiful staircases. He worked with his father, and they both did that. But he did a lot of self-learning and really wanted to be an architect. So he got a job with an architectural firm in New York City. Turner claims to have given him the style and the dimensions of all the rooms, and under his direction, Perry developed the plans. Well, he made a good choice because Perry later relocated to Binghamton. He supervised the construction of the building. And while living in Binghamton, he designed many of our most famous landmarks, including the county courthouse, the cast iron Perry building, 4 churches, an armory. He did some beautiful architecture here in town. And in a later life, he became the New York State architect. He designed over 40 armories across the state, was responsible for completing the New York State Capitol at Albany. So Turner definitely made a good choice, and the castle was his very first major architectural project. Construction began in 1858 and would continue for 8 years. This is an old drawing of the laying of the cornerstone, which included a time capsule. You can see those guys with the top hats. Those are Masons. The free and accepted Masons played a huge role in the building of the asylum. And by the way, notice the guy holding the umbrella here? That gives us a little bit of a clue. It turns out that day there was a torrential downpour all day long. The whole area was just flooded with muddy rain, and but it didn't deter anybody. The entire community showed up to watch the laying of the cornerstone. Excuse me just a second, I'm going to let a few more people in here. Okay, and construction would continue for 8 years. And there was the artist's conception of the completed building. Now, by 1864, the building wasn't anywhere near done, but the north wing was completed enough to start allowing patients in. 15 patients were admitted. And the interesting thing is that Turner was installed as the director of the facility. There's a list of patients that were admitted, the first 15 plus more that were admitted later. And it's interesting to go down the list. First of all, I've pixeled out the last names, but it's interesting to look at where they were from. A lot of them were from downstate. Average age looks to be about, I don't know, 30 or so, 35. All men, no women were allowed. And look at the occupations. You know, there's a lawyer, some gentlemen, insurance salesmen. These were, you know, fairly well-to-do men that had a problem with alcoholism, and mostly from downstate. By the way, the former mayor of Syracuse was on the list, and a son of Harriet Beecher Stowe. Well, Turner had very harsh disciplinary methods. He ruled that place with an iron fist. And unfortunately, his patients weren't used to that kind of treatment. So they complained to their parents back home and their families. And the families complained to the Board of Trustees, and the Board of Trustees turned against Turner. Eventually, Turner was accused of mismanagement, and there was a fire, major fire. Turner is accused of starting the fire, and he's forced to resign. Turner ultimately left the area, went back to New England, and spent the rest of his life trying to get his castle back. Turner was replaced by a man, Dr. Albert Day, as the director. Dr. Day was totally the opposite of Turner. Very easygoing guy. Time to let a few more people in. And there he is. That's Dr. Albert Day. He did a lot to promote the asylum. And here is a good example. This is a feature article in Harper's Weekly from 1869. And it shows you what was going on in the asylum at that time. And it looks more like a resort than it does an asylum for alcoholism. Look at this. There's a gymnasium, bowling alley. There's a huge room where a patient is sitting there playing his violin. Reading room, billiard room, great big chapel. It's a beautiful facility. And the problem now is the inebriate asylum is being perceived as a resort for wealthy downstate alcoholics, especially by the people that lived here in Binghamton. You know, anywhere they go in town, they look up on the hill and they see this gorgeous castle, and it's thought of as a resort. Well, guess what? There's another fire. This one was in 1870, and this time Day is accused of starting the fire, and he's forced to resign. Things are going downhill fast. At its peak, the inebriate asylum was treating 334 patients. By 1878, the population had dropped to 39. And the next year, New York State governor declared the whole experiment, the inebriate asylum experiment, a complete failure. He recommended converting the facility to an asylum for the chronic insane. So there it is. 15 years after it opened, it closed, and it was declared a failure. So we go on to the state hospital. 1880, renovations started to convert the building to a mental asylum, and Isaac Perry was contracted to do the design work. He supervised the renovation. First thing they did was set up male and female wards. Again, the inebriate asylum was male only. So now the male wards would be on the north wing, the female wards on the south wing. Here's a floor plan looking down from above. You can see how the patient rooms are divided up. Down at the end of each ward, there is a large day room, lots of windows. This is where patients would congregate during the day. They also added metal stairwells, and that center section was maintained as office space and a reception area. But the big change was this. If you look at the back of the building, there are these huge wash towers. They're called wash towers because that's where all the bathing facilities were, the toilets. Okay, opened on October 19th, 1881, and at that time it was called the Binghamton Asylum for the Chronic Insane. Dr. Theodore Armstrong was installed as the first director. And another example of the artifact collection in the Broome County Historical Society, we have his diary as well. And it's very interesting. Here's an example from October 19th. First patient was brought to Binghamton Asylum for the Chronic Insane from the Ulster County Poor Farm. And I'll go through a few more interesting excerpts from here. Now, keep in mind, this is more than just a hospital. This is designed to be a self-sufficient community with farms, livestock, greenhouses, you name it. Everything you needed to survive as a community was either being built or was already in place on the campus. So this guy, first of all, he had one patient at the time, but he had a lot more to do than just tend to patients. He was busy doing farm work. And I'll show you an example of that. On October 31st, his patients were all quiet. He spent his day castrating pigs. November 8th, Robert is excited and broke 6 panes of glass. December 2nd, patients were quiet, had singing in the day room, made 2 camisoles and put one on Mrs. M. Camisole is like a straitjacket. December 4th, put Ezra in the upper ward and used a muff, that's a arm restraint, and he killed a heifer. December 12th, Philip will probably die soon, looked at coffins. December 14th, Philip died. December 26th, Mrs. M raving, broke 10 panes of glass this time. The cows are giving about 29 quarts of milk per day. And finally, cows looking very well, patients very disturbed. So this is pretty interesting. It gives you a good glimpse of life in the asylum over the first few weeks. Okay, soon after opening, 298 patients were transferred from Utica, Willard, and other New York State asylums. In 1890, it was renamed Binghamton State Hospital. So it grew fast. And here's a nice old map of the area that shows how fast it grew. And this highlighted building here, that's the castle. You can see that they added those buildings onto the back of it, but they also added all these other buildings. So they had several over here for handling patients, but they also had an assembly hall, kitchen, bakery, laundry, cobbler shop, carpenter shop, greenhouses, and then the farms, the cow barns, the piggery, hennery. Again, it was a complete city all to itself. And the labor was dependent on, it was dependent on patient labor, basically. Here's an example of some of the buildings that were added. East Hall in 1885. This was designed by Isaac Perry. It was since demolished. North Hall, same story. This is Broadmoor Hall. Now, it was built in 1907, but it is still standing. It's abandoned, but it's still standing. Beautiful assembly hall designed by Isaac Perry. This is where they had huge productions, movies, plays, concerts for the patients and the staff. That has since been demolished. And some more of the buildings, South Hall, Fairmount. This is an interesting picture of that addition that went on the back of the castle. This is the east addition, and this is north, and that's south. Woodlawn Cottage. Edgewood Tuberculosis Hospital is no longer there. Firehouse, laboratory is still there. These two on the top, the Director's House and Sunnyside Business Office. Both of those buildings are still standing, and both of them are still in use. The old staff residence. Ferris Hall is still standing, but it's vacant. Bakery, carpenter shop, plumbing shop, laundry. Most of those, not the plumbing shop, but the others are still there. Beautiful greenhouse. And then a couple of the barns. Isaac Perry actually designed that barn that you see there on the top. And then the Parkhurst farmhouse and dairy barn. I believe Parkhurst was down about where the corner of Colesville and Court Street, Colesville and Barlow Road are. The original power plant, two pictures of it, that was down right on the river. And it was eventually demolished and replaced with a more recent power plant, which is also now abandoned. And then those two pictures at the bottom are Pine Camp cottages. Pine Camp was a nice little campground right on the Susquehanna River, a little upstream from Frito-Lay. By the 1950s, patient population peaked at over 3,000. Every square space of the castle was being used for patients. This is interesting. In 1954, the castle turrets were removed, the tower turrets. And you can see these beautiful tower turrets. Well, they were starting to think that maybe they're getting a little old, they might start crumbling, and there was some concern that they might fall. So they took them off, and burn that image into your mind, and I'll go on to the next image. That's what it looks like today. Quite a drastic change. And we all look at the castle now and think how gorgeous that architecture is. But man, just imagine if those castle turrets were still there. Okay, in fact, that's a shot of them being removed. Starting in the 60s, new methods of treatment and a trend to deinstitutionalize patients, get them back into society, brought a rapid decline in patient population. By the 70s, patients were no longer housed in the castle. The castle was still used, but it was used for staff offices. And surplus buildings fell into disrepair all over the campus, and many were eventually demolished. This is a neat picture. This is actually a photograph. It looks like a drawing, but it was a photograph taken in 1957. Had snow on the ground. That shows what the campus looked like in 1957. By the way, this is the old tuberculosis hospital that we looked at. That's what it looked like in 1957. Now let me show you since then. Every one of those X's is a building that has been demolished over the years. And the few buildings that are still standing, those are threatened with demolition as we speak. They are most of those are in very serious condition. No climate control at all, exposed to the elements. And I'm afraid it's only a matter of time before those may be demolished. 1993, the castle was finally closed, and it was closed because of a collapse of a portion of the facade. Down on the south wing here, you can see this section here is missing those nice architectural features like that. That's because they fell off, and they fell off, damaging the other parts of the facade and this staircase here. What you see here now is plywood. Building has remained closed and sealed from the public since then. It was it was 28 years ago. And it's interesting, let me just add at this point, there was a tour of the building just prior to that collapse. The tour was conducted by the Preservation Association of the Southern Tier. It was the last tour that went through the building, and just weeks after that tour, the collapse happened and the building has been closed and sealed ever since. The only good thing is that all those stones that fell off and all those stones that were salvaged from the staircase here were saved. They're in about 3 different locations around the campus. We all know where they are, so when the time comes and the funding allows, it can all be recreated. Restored. There's an interesting comparison of how the building's appearance has changed over the years. Again, this is before the turrets were taken off. Here it is after they were taken off, and here it is after the collapse of the facade. This is what it looks like today. And just to put all of this in perspective, I got a timeline here. Construction began in 1858. In 1864, the inebriate asylum opened. 15 years later, it closed. So in the grand scheme of things here, you can see how little period of time it was an inebriate asylum, which was what it was originally built for. 1881, the chronic asylum opened. 1890, it was renamed Binghamton State Hospital. 1974, it was renamed Binghamton Psychiatric Center. And finally, in 1993, the building was closed. Let me show you a few numbers here. During the time it was an inebriate asylum, population peaked at 334. During the time it was part of the state hospital population peaked at over 3,000. Okay, and since it closed in 1993 until today, the building has sat vacant. Since then, since 93, it was listed on the National Register of Historic Places. 1997, it was designated as a National Historic Landmark. 1998, it was officially put up for sale. In 1999, it was identified as one of New York State's most endangered historic landmarks. And today, 28 years after closing, the building remains empty. So let's take a walk through. I've got quite a few pictures here. I'll go through fairly quickly. First of all, the outside of the building. This is the front. Faces west, which, by the way, you get some beautiful sunsets up there. Notice the stone. It's the stone is very high quality stone quarried from the Syracuse area on the front of the building. This is right over the main entrance. This is the side. There's a bandstand there, a gazebo that was also designed by Isaac Perry. It's still there. This is the back of the building. You can see that the stone is noticeably different. It's a lower grade stone, and it was quarried more locally. See that round window up there at the top? Let's zoom in on that. That's the all-seeing eye. That's a Masonic symbol. And like I said, the Masons were very involved with the construction of this building. There's the old bell. It used to be up in one of the towers. It rang curfew every night for the patients of the inebriate asylum. It's on permanent display out in front now. Okay, the main entrance. We'll go in the front door. And that's the first thing you see, two gorgeous staircases made out of three different kinds of wood, beautiful original fixtures on the newel posts. It just, in terms of staircases, it just doesn't get any better than that. And again, it's because of Perry's background as a staircase designer, which he learned from his father. Now, on two of the four newel posts, there's a little treat. If you look real close, you can find a little hand-carved acorn. The story goes that that's Isaac Perry's signature trademark. And he left those intentionally just because he wanted to leave his signature. In fact, several of his works do include hand-carved acorns. Don't know if that was the reason or not, but makes for an interesting story. One of the former employees was a housekeeper there, and she told me the story that every morning when she came into work, she would go to that newel post and rub that acorn with her finger for good luck. Okay, this is the office areas and reception areas right there in the center of the building. And you'll notice as I'm going through here how good the overall condition of this building is. It is in remarkably good condition, considering that it's been sitting for 28 years and the age of the building. There's a reason that it's in that good of a condition, and that's thanks to the Greater Binghamton Health Center, the people that own this building and maintain it. They made a conscious decision to keep the heat on for the last 30 years. Not cheap, they kept the heat on, and they continued to do basic maintenance, and they keep it secure, protect it from vandalism. You know, it's monitored around the clock with video cameras and security systems. That effort did not come cheap, but we owe the Greater Binghamton Health Center and Office of Mental Health a huge debt of gratitude for doing what they've done to keep this building in such wonderful condition. Here's another one of the offices, and here's a close-up of that, or one of the ceiling medallions up in the ceiling. This is the director's office. This is where Joseph Edward Turner worked and all of his successors. Again, all that stuff on the shelves, it was put there for a photo shoot. It is not there now. Everything has been removed. And by the way, my virtual background, if you noticed, is the, the director's office. Look at the gorgeous wood. Okay, to the wards now. This is the first floor. It's confusing because some people call it a 4-story building, some call it a 3-story building with 2 basements. This is the what I call the first floor, which is some people would call it second floor. Here's a male ward on one of the upper floors. Now you see the flaking paint, that's no big deal. Structurally, the building is in great shape. Tin ceiling with flaking paint is not an issue at all. You can see here how they've made changes. These were originally the real high wooden doors that you saw down on the first floor. And now there's been a lot of remodeling done over the years. This is an interesting shot, and I'll tell you the story. I happened to interview a former attendant on this floor. He was in charge of the floor. And he told the story, and I had heard it before, but he confirmed it. There was a man, a patient on this floor, and every day there was an easy chair right here. Every day this man would sit in the easy chair and he would shuffle his feet back and forth. And that's what made these grooves in the floor. There's skylights in the top floors. They believed that light, they wanted to get as much light into the building as possible just to make it a pleasant environment, and it would be thought of as therapeutic. One of the patient rooms. If you were a female patient on the 3rd floor, this might be your view from your room. This is down on the ground floor, which some people refer to as the upper basement. And this is looking the other direction. Again, don't worry about the peeling paint. This originally was a kitchen and dining hall for the patients. Now, the wash towers that we were talking about, I'll show you the inside of those, but that's what they looked like on the outside. Tile floors with nice inlaid tile patterns. Okay, up above the entrance, there was a large library, and this here was a big stained glass window. And actually, this was the original window. They changed it shortly after the building was built to a different shape, and I'll show you that. In fact, that's it there. Beautiful stained glass windows with Christian subject. I've heard the claim that they may be Tiffany, and they are not Tiffany. This is where the library was, just off from that little room where the windows were. Now we'll go up stairs to the chapel. And there it is. Again, it's empty now. Back in 1981 was the centennial, the 100th anniversary of the opening of the state hospital in 1881. And they decided that it might be nice to make a museum. So a museum was set up here in the chapel. And what they did was they went all over the campus, scrounging up artifacts, photographs, old drawings, books, documents, medical instruments. They gathered all that in the chapel area, and they set up a real nice museum. This was 1981 when it was actually put up before that. Oh, and by the way, this is the inside view of the all-seeing eye. You're standing in the chapel looking up. Okay, and that's what it kind of looked like when it was a museum. It was a lot more orderly and straightened up, but you can see an example of the type stuff that was on display. Now at its peak, this was all filled with beds, and it was a dormitory space for patients. Basically, all that stuff, it was just cleared out, oh gosh, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago. But it sat there all that time, undisturbed. An old ECT machine that was on display. And this is interesting, an even earlier Edison ECT machine. Old documents, logbooks. And again, all of this stuff is being logged into a database, being preserved, and meanwhile protected from humidity and temperature. Very interesting find. When we were cleaning all that stuff out of the building, came across something we had heard about but never were able to locate, and that is a huge collection of glass plate negatives. These are photographs that were taken 100 years ago. And we ended up coming up with more than 5,000 of these. And they're pictures of life at the state hospital 100 years ago. Buildings that are no longer there, doctors, nurses, and also patients. Now, again, all of it's been removed. Now let's take a walk up to the attic. Bunch of different attic spaces. They're all interesting. Nothing really to talk about other than the condition. You can see that there's no major water leaks coming through the roof or anything like that. But it's just interesting to look at it, and mainly because hardly nobody in the world has ever seen it. Yeah, the roof is it was actually repaired not too many years ago. So the roof is in very good condition. climb up through this little trap door. And now you're in the area that's right beside the dome over the chapel. Massive wooden beams. And then a few more steps up and you're on the roof. And you can see that they've done a lot of ironwork here to pretty much stabilize the stonework. Nice view from up there. There's a sub basement. And that's what it looks like down there. You know, you would expect to see mud and water on the floor. Nothing. I probably ought to mention, you know, a lot of people tell me, man, you go down to the basement and you can find where they used to chain people up. And I'm here to tell you there's none of that. There is some graffiti though, 1928 graffiti. So that's a quick tour. Let me just say something about demolition by neglect. In the world of historic preservation, that's a famous line, demolition by neglect. What it means is if you neglect a building long enough, it will likely deteriorate to the point where it can't be saved. It's happened to a lot of buildings. It's happening to some of the buildings on the campus. And let me show you an example. We talked about Broadmoor Hall. It was built in 1907. That's almost 50 years after the castle was built. Let's take a quick walk inside. Looks pretty sad. And that's even sadder. And it looks that sad because they turned the heat off. It was exposed to the elements. And if you want to destroy a building, that's all you got to do is expose it to the elements. And this is a perfect example of what can happen. Again, if it weren't thanks to Greater Binghamton Health Center, the castle would look like this today. Okay, we're almost ready to wrap up here. Let me talk about some recent developments. First of all, 2006, there was interest by a developer from Buffalo. He took an interest in this building. He wanted to develop it into affordable senior housing. Well, he actually did that to this building in Buffalo, which looks surprisingly like our castle. It was a nun's convent. His architectural firm got it, turned it into affordable senior housing. This was, gosh, probably 25 years ago. And it's an amazing success. I've been through it and the rooms are beautiful. It's an amazing success story. So that Buffalo developer, he chartered a bus. He brought about a team of, oh gosh, at least 20 architects and engineers, went through the castle with a fine-tooth comb and started developing plans. Just the next year, Upstate Medical University decided that they wanted the building. And they wanted to use it turn it into their clinical campus here and use it as an education center. That was formally announced. $12.4 million was allocated by the state to start the rehab, the phase one of the renovation. Unfortunately, just after that announcement was made, that $12.4 million was frozen. It's because the state was going through some difficult times in 2008 financially. and the money was frozen. It was still there. It could still be had for that purpose eventually, but it was frozen. Well, it ended up being frozen for 4 years. By the end of that 4-year period, the money was finally released. Well, the key players at Upstate Medical University were no longer there, and there was no longer a strong interest in taking the castle. Wonderful opportunity to rehab and reuse that building was lost. Along comes Binghamton University in 2015. Binghamton University announced that they would assume stewardship of the building and develop a plan for its reuse, which means they didn't have an idea, didn't know what they were going to do with it, but they wanted to get it, assume stewardship, and in the meantime, come up with a plan that for reusing the building. Well, the following year, that $12.4 million was made available to the university for starting the renovation. And the year after that, a building study was started. Large team of engineers and architects went through the building, spent months, 7 months going through the building, determining what was wrong with it, what needed to be done to get it up to speed, to get it up to code, and how much it might cost to do it. Building study was completed in 2018. And as soon as that was completed, a feasibility study was begun. Feasibility study was to determine how, now that we know what needs to be done to it, what should we do with it? You know, what type of business or educational facility should this become? And as of now, that feasibility study is still in progress. And of course, after it started, the pandemic came along and everything pretty much stopped. So we can only hope that eventually, when the pandemic is behind us, things will resume and continue to move forward. Now, Binghamton is not the only community in upstate New York with a historic asylum, abandoned asylum. There are 3 others that are close by, and I want to show you what other communities are doing with their abandoned asylums. Utica, built in 1843, it was the very first asylum in New York State for the treatment of mental illness. When I went through this building a few years ago, it was hazardous. It was very hazardous. Here it is now. A big section of that building was renovated into a museum and a medical record storage facility. Wonderful preservation success story. How about Willard? There's a famous asylum there. It was actually the first asylum for the chronic insane. A lot of the initial patients that came to the castle came from Willard. Willard, there are a lot of buildings on its campus, just like ours. A lot of those buildings have fallen into disrepair, and some of them can't be salvaged, but a lot of them were salvaged and renovated and are in current use today. And finally, Buffalo. A lot of you probably have heard of this asylum in Buffalo. Buffalo State Hospital, later known as Psychiatric Center. It was designed by a very famous architect, H.H. Richardson. And again, of all the buildings that I've been through, this is probably the worst. It was extremely dangerous. Floors were collapsing. I noticed somebody says, put a little scribble on the screen if you could kindly remove that. I don't think I'm able to remove it. Otherwise, we'll just have to all look at that until the end of the program. But anyway, back to the Buffalo Asylum. It was in terrible condition. And look at it today. Amazing. Renovated as a hotel and urban resort and conference center. Meanwhile, Binghamton's Asylum, built 1858, very first inebriate asylum in the country, relatively good condition, a National Historic Landmark, has an uncertain future. So again, hopefully, well, let me just add a couple of things here. Building is not just a Binghamton treasure, it's a national treasure. When you say it's a National Historic Landmark, there are no other National Historic Landmarks in Broome County. There's not any in Tioga County. In fact, the nearest building to us that's a National Historic Landmark is one of the buildings on the Cornell campus in Ithaca. For 30 years, this community has worked to save the castle. We've seen opportunities to rehab it come and go. It sits empty while similar buildings around the state have been saved. So again, let's hope when this pandemic is behind us, things will once again move forward. And by the way, the huge response to this program tonight, I think is just further testament to to tell us how important this building is to our community. I got one more thing to say here, and that's about the people from the castle. Talked to a lot of former employees over the years. Some of those employees goes back to the 1940s and 1950s. They have wonderful stories. Every one of them, every former employee says the same thing, that this was a big community, that employees were just part of a big family. Everybody pulled together, everybody looked out for each other, and nurses, attendants had a great love and respect for the people they cared for. Now, you drive around town now with the pandemic going on and you pass a health center or a hospital, there's a sign out in front that says heroes work here. Well, I can tell you that heroes worked here. They worked here for over 100 years and they still work there today. And not just the staff, but the patients. Patients, people that for whatever reason were sent to live here. Many would never leave. Each one had a story. I think it's important that we think of them with the dignity and respect they deserve. Which brings me to this last couple slides here. We looked at this slide back at the beginning, shows how the campus grew. If you notice up here in the corner, there was a cemetery. That cemetery was there to handle burials for deceased parents who had no family to take care of their burial. First burial took place in 1890, the last one in 1971. It was interrupted for a period of time in the early 60s when Route 17 was put through the middle of the cemetery. Part of it had to be, a big chunk of it had to be moved to another location on the campus. But from 1890 to 1971, 4,009 patients were buried in the State Hospital Cemetery. If you were to go there now, you would see, I don't know, a few markers of assorted design, some of them scattered around the grounds. You go to the other section that was relocated, and there are no visible signs of burials there other than after a snowfall. But I can tell you that every grave is marked. Every grave is marked with a number and on a piece of marble that has since sunk below the surface of the grass. It's a couple inches below the surface. Very carefully laid out on a grid, so any person that's buried in that cemetery can be located. Well, I can tell you that a couple of years ago, we started talks with the Office of Mental Health and the Greater Binghamton Health Center. We felt that there was a need to mark the cemetery to honor the patients, the former patients that were buried there. And I can tell you, I'm pleased to announce tonight that has finally been approved. Possibly as early as later this year, a marker will go up in that area, visible from the road, honoring the burial of the 4,009 patients. It's a long time coming, and it's just the start, but it finally happening. So you heard it here first, by the way. Okay, a couple thank yous here. First of all, and foremost, to the Greater Binghamton Health Center and the State Office of Mental Health for keeping the heat on and protecting this landmark, for the opportunity to research, photograph, and document the history of this building. Thank you. To the Broome County Historical Society for maintaining its amazing collection of historical documents. I didn't tell you how we got those historical documents. All of a sudden, a few years ago, we got a phone call. It was a realtor over in New England. They were cleaning out a garage. They came across a cabinet loaded with Turner's original documents. They noticed Broome County was mentioned, so they called the Broome County Historical Society and asked if we were interested in it. Well, the rest is history. Now it's all in our vault in the Broome County Historical Society. Thank you to the Preservation Association of the Southern Tier for its 30-year ongoing effort to keep the fate of this building and the importance of its preservation in the public eye. Thank you to Assemblywoman Donna Lepardo for all she has done and continues to do to promote the preservation of this historic landmark. And finally, to the former employees and patients of the state hospital for sharing their memories and their incredible stories. Once again, let me, if for people who tuned in late, just remind everybody that there is no access to the building at this time. And the reasons for that are, it's important that we protect the building while these feasibility studies are going on, so there is no further demolition because it's hazardous, the second reason. And third, to honor patient privacy. It's an active health center, and it would not be good to have people walking around the grounds on an active health center. Thank you so much for attending. I hope you enjoyed this. Again, if you have questions, comments, feel free to send comments and chats, and I will try to get to them after we're done here. Thanks again, and stay well. Whoops, okay.
Okay, all right, I'm unmuted finally. Thank you so much, Roger, for a wonderful presentation. I'm sure anyone who now drives anywhere near that building just knows so much more about it than had ever expected to learn about it. What a wonderful history of a real gem in our area. And I certainly do hope that it can come back to life as some of those other historic landmarks have. As Roger said, put your questions in the chat box or Facebook, and he will get to them. I see we have lots and lots of them already. And thank you all for joining us this evening. The Broome County Historical Society has 5 more programs this year, one each the 3rd Wednesday of the month. We're scheduled to have them all on Zoom. We do not anticipate that the pandemic will disappear by June. Our February program is February 17th in honor of Black History Month. And Jerry Smith, his local historian and author and public speaker, will be giving us a talk on the Underground Railroad in the Southern Tier. So I hope you will all come back next month, February 17th, 6:45 p.m. Thank you again for coming, and thank you so much, Roger, for a wonderful presentation. Have a good evening.
Thank you.